understand what's going on with this bill. It's H81.
I'll try to shut up.
Who do we have on Zoom?
We have 4 witnesses.
Okay, we can't see
Maybe
them.
they want to turn on their cameras
Yes,
and
yeah.
introduce
Does
themselves.
anyone mind if I just turn this lower? So
Go ahead, yeah. Good morning. I see Kevin, I see Willie, and I see, more and more people popping up all the time. Good morning, Gay.
Good morning.
And is it Kelsey? We have you all until 11:30. I don't know whether you're appearing collectively or individually, but if you have an order that you would like to go in, that's fine. Otherwise, I'm going to suggest the order that we have on our agenda. And Gay, you're first.
Oh, that's perfectly fine. That was kind of our plan.
Okay.
All right.
Well, good morning.
Thank you. Good to see you again. I'm greatly relieved I did not have to drive to Montpelier yesterday. Storm. I appreciate that. My name is Gay Gordon Byrne. I'm the executive director of repair.org. We are organized strictly to make sure that we can all fix our stuff everywhere, everything, all at once for Oscar fans. And it is a problem everywhere. And that's our new motto. We're basically about a coalition of about 200 businesses and about 200 trade associations. And collectively, all we work on is right to repair. We are strictly nonpartisan, and we are working on right to repair currently in, I think, 27 other states, could be 28, we never know. And Vermont is very much a part of this, and we're really excited to be here. Obviously, we strongly support H81, and I brought along Willie Cade and Kevin O'Reilly and Kelsey as experts in the area. I don't farm, I ride a chair, but I do ride a chair that's connected to technology. And the fundamental problem with farming is now that it is connected to technology. So if you can't fix your stuff because there's a computer part, which seems to be the main problem, then you can't get your crop in, you can't get your crop out, you can't make money. And these are very profound problems, even if the equipment involved is not that, giant, picture that you see of farms out in Western United States where you can see you can't even see the horizon. There's so much corn. It applies to dairy. It applies to anything that anybody that's cutting wood is trying to do. If there's a chip in it, the chances are really good that it's not possible for you to repair your stuff without having to go to the dealership. And that has its own consequences called you're stuck with whatever it is that they offer, how they offer it, how much they price it, and how convenient it is. So that's kind of the framework of where we're coming from. There absolutely is a problem, even if you're not hearing in droves from farmers. Farmers, we've discovered, don't tend to get very involved because they're busy. I mean, they're just too busy doing the stuff that they need to do to stay in business. So we rely very heavily on people that can speak for them, and that's why we're here. Now, completely, just a little bit of background. The problem is not that you can't fix your stuff, but that you're not allowed to buy the parts and tools and service materials that you need to fix it. It's very easy to monopolize something when you're the only source. And right now, the manufacturers are the only source. This bill will change that, and it will change it profoundly. So I hope that you will pay attention to the rest of the experts in the room, and we'll all be around to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. So Willie is next on our list, but up to you.
Let me defer to Kevin O'Reilly, and then Kelsey, and then I'll go, okay?
All right, thank you. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning. Thank you so much, members of the committee, for having us, for hearing this important bill. As Gay mentioned, this is something that we're hearing from farmers across the country. And, to introduce myself, my name's Kevin O'Reilly. I'm the Right to Repair campaign director with PIRG, or the Public Interest Research Group. And much of my focus has been on this agricultural right to repair issue. So, I've worked with more than 100 farmers from all over the country, as well as researched the way that modern agricultural equipment is basically engineered to lock out repair. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that, and then also talk a little bit about, there have been some industry agreements that have come out recently that frankly don't solve the problem. They don't meet the need. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. But first of all, let's just talk about how a farmer interacts with their equipment and where they're locked out of repairs in the process, right? So you're driving your tractor along, and in this modern equipment, right, it's loaded with software, it's loaded with sensors. We found, there are 125 software connected sensors in a 2016 John Deere combine. The newer stuff, I can be sure, has even more, maybe double that number. And so when there's a problem with something that's connected to the software, to the computer system, what will happen is there'll be an error code that's generated on the screen in the dash of the cabin of the tractor, right? And so the problem is that farmers can't get access to all of the diagnostic software tools that they need in order to figure out what the problem is. They might be able to figure out some of them, but there are going to be many problems that they cannot get the information for. They don't have comprehensive access to the troubleshooting steps that dealers have access to. And then finally, right at the end of the process, after you've made the mechanical repair, for many of these repairs, you need to actually pair the part electronically to the tractor itself. And that's done through the installation of what John Deere calls a payload file. It's essentially, embedded software, firmware. I can throw a bunch of technical terms, but it's like your printer driver. When you get a new printer, you've got to install, now I guess you do it online. You used to get a disk, but install this printer driver so that the printer can speak to the computer. It's much in the same way for parts when it comes to agricultural equipment. And because farmers don't have access to that, because independent mechanics can't get access to that, that means they have to go back to the dealer. And when they have to go back to the dealer, they're forced to pay whatever the dealer wants to charge and deal with delays, because there's really this bottleneck of there's only one party that can take care of this problem. So I've talked to farmers who have faced delays of weeks, of more than a month. And some have lost significant portions of their crop as a result, right? If there's a storm coming in, your combine breaks down, and you can't go and harvest what you need to harvest before that storm comes in. That's a loss of crop, and that's a loss of your profit, right? That's with how tight margins are for farmers today. That's a serious concern of theirs. Right to Repair would make sure that they have access to the tools they need to completely repair their devices or their equipment, which they can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for without having to go back to the dealer. So that's a significant thing. And I will add too, right? Not every farmer wants to make every repair on their own, and that's why it's so important that these materials are also provided to independent mechanics. You've got a basic right to repair your car. And that means that you can still go to your corner mechanic to, get your pickup checked out and make sure that everything's right there. That's the same kind of system we want to set up for farm equipment. Talking a little bit about the memorandums of understanding that have come from John Deere and now Case New Holland, both signed with the American Farm Bureau Federation. I think, it's important to note that A, this is an acknowledgement from these manufacturers that there's a problem to solve. But B, the fact of the matter is those agreements aren't good enough. The biggest shortcoming of these, right, is the fact that there is no enforcement. There's no path for a farmer who is denied access to repair materials to go in front of, a court of law and make sure that they get access to what they need, what is guaranteed. So that's a big shortcoming of this. But the other problem too is that while there's, frankly, some language in the memorandum of understandings that are okay, the problem is that there are pretty massive loopholes. For one, right, what they promise when it comes to software, which is, really the crux of the issue when it comes to agricultural equipment, they're only promising to provide tools that they're already making available to customers. And Willie and I have seen firsthand, we've compared the publicly available software tool to what the dealer has. And we saw how critical diagnostic, troubleshooting, and repair authorizing functionality was lacking in those customer tools, meaning they're still on the hook. Farmers still have to go back to the dealer. So, you know, it's really exciting to see that you all are considering this bill. It's an incredibly important bill. And it's something that, you know, Vermont is not alone in, I will say, right? Colorado is 2 votes away from sending a bill on this issue to the governor's desk. There's another 14 states who have considered or are actively considering this kind of legislation. So really, agricultural right to repair is an idea whose time has come, and we hope that Vermont will help to make sure that farmers, you know, in the great state of Vermont as well as across the country, are able to fix their stuff when it breaks.
Great, thank you so much, Kevin. And Willie or Kelsey, would you like to go up next?
Ladies first.
Thank you. Thanks again for taking time to hear testimony from us today. I'm Kelsey. I live in Jeffersonville, Vermont. I'm a transplant from Montana, where I grew up on a farm. So I'm a flatlander from the Rocky Mountains. But I have I have dedicated time here in Vermont to working on farms. I worked on a small 6-acre organic produce farm down in Royalton, and I worked on a vineyard and cidery in Barnard while here in Vermont. And I'm in the process of starting my own little 1/4-acre homestead here in Jeffersonville. So while my experience I'm going to talk about stems from my time in Montana, where I've most interacted with right to repair issues, these are issues that will be emerging or are emerging here in Vermont on the produce farm. When things needed to be harvested, they needed to be harvested then. When they needed to go on the ground, they needed to go on the ground at that time. We did use a tractor. It was an older tractor, so we still had the ability to repair it. But as equipment breaks down, it gets replaced, and these will be emerging issues on those smaller farms. Again, also on the cidery, when we were pressing cider, if things broke down and we were delayed months, the apples could have rotted and we would not have been able to produce cider. And these farms are farms with even smaller profit margins than my father's. So turning to my experience with right to repair, after graduating high school, both my sister and I would return to help my parents with haying. It's a really hectic time when we got to get the alfalfa down and baled in just a matter of a couple weeks on a large farm. We're fortunate in that we have multiple tractors so that we can be moving everyone can be driving a tractor at all hours of the daylight, and some of them have lights, and we are driving all night. So we had just got a shiny new tractor that we were very excited about to operate the baler. It had air conditioning, which is what I was most excited about. And I was out driving the baler when all of a sudden it shut down on me. I'm a farmer for my folks 10 days a year, so I thought for sure that was user error. Tried to fire it back up and couldn't get it going. Called my dad, and he came out to help me. He was able to get it fired up right away, which was embarrassing. But not long thereafter, everything shut down again. We were getting an error signal, and my dad was convinced that it was an issue with the fuel line. He called the manufacturer, and the soonest he could get a tech out to look at us was 10 days from then. This is because when farmers are using equipment, all farmers are using that equipment at the same period of time. So that's when things break down. That's when manufacturers need to be sending techs out. And so everyone gets backlogged while all the equipment is breaking down at the same time. My dad asked if he could rent the diagnostic or borrow the diagnostic equipment from them. No. Could he buy it from them? Also not an option. Luckily for us, we were fortunate enough that we could detach one of the tractors operating the rake and pull the baler while our shiny new tractor sat still in the field. And I was disappointed because I no longer had air conditioning, but we were able to get everything baled before the storm came in 2 days later. I took off, but my dad did fill me in on how everything went down after that. The technician came out, had to haul the tractor into the dealership where they could repair it. But at that point, the error signal that pops up on the computer screen had disappeared. So it took them a month of driving it around periodically out in the parking lot until they were able to trigger that error signal. From that, they were able to learn that it was a fuel line sensor that was broken down, not the fuel line itself, but just the sensor. And they were able to repair that. The cost of labor and the part for repairing that was $400 to $500, but the total bill came to $5,000 from the cost of hauling the tractor into Great Falls and the cost of all of the labor from the time spent driving it around in a parking lot. So my dad, having learned that he can't repair his new tractor, went out and bought another tractor, a 30-year-old tractor with 12,000 hours on it, which if you're not familiar with hours on tractors, that's like the equivalent of buying a vehicle with 300,000 miles on it. But what this tractor meant was that if things broke down, we could repair them in the field. And sure enough, that year, the first year, we got the red light on the tractor, but this time we were able to call our local mechanic. He was able to run us through the diagnostics. We were able to figure out what the issue was with the transmission. My dad was able to get a part from the local mechanic for $30 and fix it in the field the next day. And we were able to get back to business. So what Right to Repair really means is it's local food system, food resiliency, and helping farmers get their bottom line, which are all things that I think Vermont really values. So that's my firsthand story. I know it comes from Montana, but I think it'll be just as relevant here.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. And we'll switch over to Willie now.
Thank you. And thank you for hearing our testimony today. We are privileged to be able to do this with you. I must admit my colleagues are much too polite about their testimony. I mean, I understand the context of it, but as Kelsey's story suggests, there's an enormous amount of anger out in agriculture now around this issue. And it is a manufactured issue for the profitability of but a few. And we need your help in this. Let's not sugarcoat this at all. This is a monopoly on the issue of repair of equipment. It's not me saying this. It is the U.S. Department of Justice weighing in on the antitrust suit against John Deere here in the Northern District of Illinois. They even asked the judge permission to write more than 15 pages in their opinion because they were so adamant that this is a monopolistic practice that takes advantage of farmers. John Deere is often saying, and other manufacturers often say in their public testimony, well, we let people fix 98% of what they want to fix. And that's a literal quote to the Securities and Exchange Commission. The and their logic behind that is twofold. First, that the EPA says that they can't let people repair their own emissions. That's in fact not true. It's a myth. And as a matter of fact, the legislation that controls that particular issue, the Clean Air Act, specifically requires manufacturers to do that. And I will send to committee staff citations on specific U.S. code and regulations on those issues. I won't go into it now because people's eyes glaze over. But suffice it to say that when you read the language, the specific language in the regulation says two things. First, it says that any and all information shall be provided in order to repair emission systems. Any and all information. And second of all, John Deere and all the other manufacturers well know it because they put it in their manuals. Well, they put it in some of their manuals. About half of their manuals, we went through 279 manuals, the operator's manual. About half of them say that people can choose to have an independent repair person fix their equipment, or they can do it themselves. Except John Deere, Case IH, New Holland, Foss do not make that software, those tools available in order to do that. And quite frankly, this is the one that really, really annoys me on this, is that John Deere will often in their public testimony say that tampering with emission systems is illegal, and therefore giving these tools out will allow farmers to tamper. Okay, I don't know that it does, and even if it does, it doesn't matter because that's not the responsibility of the OEM. It's the responsibility of the equipment owner to maintain their equipment. And what they cite is 40 CFR 1068-101B, paragraph 1, which is an anti-tampering regulation. What they conveniently overlook is the 6th paragraph in that subsection that says that they are required to provide that information. So they're cherry picking on that. And they're doing it at the cost of people like Kelsey's father, who, by the way, is a wonderful guy. And by the way, he raises bulls, and he is got that kind of bull personality. It's wonderful. So all in all, what I'm saying here is this is legislation that is needed in order to level the playing field because it is a monopoly and it is not a fair market. So we need your support in having that happen. Just one quick story, if I may. I'm a 3rd-generation engineer in agriculture. My grandfather was on the board of directors of John Deere for 30 years, and he was part of the board decision when John Deere decided to make tractors. My father worked in a place where they used a lot of red paint, and I have done consulting work for places where they use a lot of yellow paint. So we are deep into this. This is a family thing. And I'm happy, and I'm sure Kevin and Gay are too, to go into any questions that you have. We can go into excruciating detail on this, but trust us, I don't think you want to go there. But we're happy to. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Willie. Well, actually, we do want to go there. We do want excruciating detail. And if I may, before I jump to any other questions, would love to hear in excruciating detail further information on the emissions portions. In Vermont, we passed the Global Warming Solutions Act, and we understand that our transportation industry is one of the biggest emitters. And we have heard concern, and we would just like to add some clarity to the issue about how this could potentially affect that sector in our goals in trying to reduce those emissions.
Great. So given that the tools and software available, and my friend Kevin's going to jump in here after me too. I can see him chomping at the bit. But I suggest, given the fragility of DEF systems, which is the current solution with Tier 4 engines, given the restrictions and the pressures for profitability, that actually farmers are less likely to comply with environmental laws, i.e. tamper, because they can't fix the systems. So that's one point on it. If you look at the Clean Air Act section, that's 40 USC 7521 M5, i.e. excruciating detail, says that any information that an OEM must provide, any information that they provide to a dealer, they must provide to independent or the owner itself. So that's one regulation. The second regulation that I talked about was 40 CFR 1068-101B paragraph 6, which is the regulation or the promulgation of that Clean Air Act to specifically do that. Also, too, is 40 CFR 1039-125F is the requirement that they put language in every one of their manuals on the front page of their manuals that says people can choose who to repair their equipment. We found, of the 279 manuals that we reviewed, not one of them had the language in boldface type on the front page. Again, I will provide written testimony after the hearing to staff on that. And then finally, the one that's the real kicker to me is 40 CFR 1039-205 subsection W, where John Deere annually for every family of engines attests unconditionally that they follow the Clean Air Act and all regulations with regards to the EPA. That is just not true. And they are subject to a $44,539 fine for every engine that is not does not meet the requirements of providing the information. And why I bring that up is that's, by the way, a large number, about $16 billion. But I bring that up because the US EPA is unwilling to hold John Deere accountable to even their own regulations. And I believe that it's a function of regulatory capture in Washington. And we need states like Vermont, we need brave legislators like you to step up and say, we are not going to allow this anymore. One, because it's an economic hardship, but two, environmentally, it's not what we want. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Kevin, did you want to comment on that quickly before I jump to other committee members' questions? We want to make sure we get them all in the amount of time we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep it short. And, I lack the encyclopedic knowledge of my friend Willie over there. But let me talk a little bit about the practical impact, right? For one, the way that farmers are skirting emissions controls and violating emissions regulation is not through the use of the dealer tool, right? This is something they're doing by getting gray or black market software installed on their devices. They're having, they're basically doing shady things from shady mechanics who are willing to do those kind of things. And that will continue to be true. That will be an option after this, and that will continue to be illegal. But like Willie said, right now they're in a situation where, maybe like Kelsey's father and their tractor, they get their tractor breaks down. They've got a 10-day delay that they can't afford to wait. What do, right? Because they can't get access to the tool, they can't properly fix it. Are they going to have to just eat the loss? Or are they going to turn to this black market solution to make sure they can get their crop harvested? The tools themselves that we're calling for are the same tools that the dealer uses, and those do not enable farmers to get by these emissions controls. If they were to try to do it, if they made a repair and used the software and they were continuing to violate the emissions law or the emission settings on the tractor, that tractor would shut down again, and they'd have to redo the repair until it was a successful repair that brought the piece of equipment back into compliance. So all of that is to say, this will not lead to more emission skirting, I think it will actually lead to less.
Great,
And
thank you
just
so
a
much.
quick, if I could jump in on that. If the farmer can't fix their equipment in time, the environmental impact of all that they've invested into that crop that then is lost just goes away. So environmentally, it's critical to be able to do these repairs properly. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Committee members, questions? Yes, Representative Levitt.
I guess my question is more, I'm sort of playing devil's advocate to all of the emails that I'm getting about how bad this bill is. And one of the things that people keep saying is it will allow farmers to fix things in their tractor that will ultimately make the tractor unsafe for them. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that in terms of, are we risking farmers' lives and their safety by letting them sort of fix things that maybe are going to hurt them in the long run?
I'd love to jump in on this because it's not technical. The farmer bought the equipment. It's theirs. It's theirs entirely, and they are totally responsible for it. And one of the things that happens in the initial contract, and if you haven't looked, you'll find it everywhere, is that the manufacturer is going to disclaim all their liability for everything allowable under Vermont law, for anything that you do as the owner that hurts you or anybody else. So they want to say that they're responsible for your safety, but they don't want to be legally responsible for your safety because it would kill them. The tort bar would go after them in a heartbeat. So they're asking to tell people that they don't have the options that they're supposed to have in this kind of fabrication of law that doesn't exist. So yeah, Mr. Farmer, if you hurt yourself, you hurt yourself. And the language is very specific. It'll say things like loss of life, loss of limb, loss of profits, and specifically in the ag sector, loss of crops. So they're not telling you that they've already disclaimed all of this stuff. And frankly, in personal liability law, there's no changes at all. So the liability issues are also somewhat trumped up.
And let me jump in on this. 40 CFR 1068.5 is a regulation that requires manufacturers to engineer their equipment so that they can comply with the regulations and laws. Now, I don't think John Deere is saying we're not good engineers and we can't engineer something safe. When my grandfather was first bringing out PTOs on tractors, there were issues with people getting their clothes caught in the PTO. So he put a guard on it. But then he noticed that people took the guard off. So he designed a new guard to it. It is the responsibility of the manufacturer. They cannot get away from it. It is their responsibility to create safe equipment, period. And that if they believe that their equipment is not safe and they're putting it out there, they have an obligation to make it safe, period.
And just one last thing I would say too, is that, right, in the same way that the manufacturer tools won't allow farmers to override emissions controls, it won't allow them to override safety controls. What I just spoke about, the same process exists. Plus, we should also trust farmers, right? I think that they know when they are capable of making a repair, and having access to the repair information will help them make a decision on whether or not this is something they can handle themselves. You know, I can change the tire on my car. If I do that incorrectly, that could be a serious safety risk to myself, but that doesn't mean that we should take away, car owners' ability to change their tire, because they need to be able to do it because it's their stuff. So I think it's just important to remember, there are going to be cases if they need to overhaul their transmission, they're probably not going to try to do that themselves. They might take it to the independent mechanic. They might even go back to the dealer. But I think we should have some trust there when it comes to those issues.
Great, thank you. Representative Templeman.
Hi, I'm a tractor owner myself, and I've had some of the problems that you've discussed in practical terms. And you've addressed actually the practical aspects or impacts of not being able to work on your tractor. But there's a financial part of this I would like to understand. So the business model of auto and tractor dealers really these days depends on servicing. Often vehicles are allowed out of inventory at really low profit margins with the intention that that vehicle will later be serviced by the department. So if the idea here is if we, and you probably already know where I'm going with this, but if we take the power out of the service industry of the manufacturer, will we see an increase in rates of the actual vehicles and equipment?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah, we've heard that argument before, and it is possible that if manufacturers are losing, well, really the dealerships aren't big losers here because they are the most trusted source of repair. And there's a whole category of repairs that people, like Kevin explained, probably don't want to undertake themselves, and they want the confidence and the experience of the dealership. That doesn't go away. It's a huge marketing advantage for the dealer. The requirements of the bill really fall on the manufacturer to make sure that there's some kind of parity and competition in the marketplace. And they've been very competitive when it comes to the initial purchase. So you can pick different colors of equipment, and that can be a very competitive marketplace. But treating that as a loss leader is not really the same thing as going to the grocery store and buying a cheap bottle of Tide. That's a complete transaction. That transaction doesn't go on for years and years. But if you're linked to the dealership through a monopoly, you're basically married to the dealership. You got to buy every bottle of Tide ever made forever, ever, with no opportunity of competition. So it really does kind of go into the monopoly area a little bit. Plus the fact that if you, oh God, I just lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Let me jump in. Okay. I absolutely respect and understand that dealers are critical in this environment, but I don't believe that it's appropriate to provide them with an exclusive monopoly for generations to come on the piece of equipment so that they don't have to compete for the service portion of it. That is not who we are as Americans. We have been successful. John Deere has been successful because they have competed, not because they're a monopoly.
Right.
And I'm going to stop now because I know our clock is hitting the half hour.
Thank you very much, all of you who joined us this morning, and for being mindful of the clock. Especially appreciate that. I don't know whether the committee had a chance to get all of its questions answered, but we'll reach out if there are outstanding questions. And thank you.
And thank you again. And for sure, we will be available for any questions or follow-up that any member would like to have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to switch gears now. Laura, do we need to stop and restart?